Hello, everyone. Eric here, Bailey here, Kim here. Guys, we're going to spoil the hell out of Spider-Man No Way Home. So again, if you haven't seen this movie, it shouldn't be the way you find out everything. Go watch the movie. But if you're sticking with us, you've seen the movie and you're ready for us to discuss spoilers. I can't stress that enough since people have fought hard to not be spoiled in this movie. All right, 3, 2, 1, full spoiler zone for Spider-Man No Way Home. And you know what I'm going to throw in? Full spoiler zone for Venom, Let There Be Carnage, and full spoiler zone for Hawkeye Episode 5, because I think both will come up in this conversation. All right, you're still with us. Guys, Kim and I did a review of this movie already, non-spoiler review. So we don't need to go too much into this, but I just do want to do a little bit quick overall thoughts. But let's start with you, Bailey, because we haven't heard your thoughts at all yet on what you thought of this film.
On Spider-Man, you mean?
Spider-Man.
Was I supposed to see that? Oh shoot!
Oh no,
I'm not prepared for this. Just kidding. I saw it twice yesterday.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that was a lot of hours of my day. I really liked it. I liked it a lot. I don't think it's a perfect movie. I'm going to say it right now. I'm going to have things I'm going to say critically later, but I do want to preface that by saying I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was funny. I thought it was also heartbreaking. I thought that everyone was acting their little butts off. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it enough to see it a second time.
Kim, let's do a quick a refresher on your thoughts, I guess. And now you don't have to hold back on anything you might have been slightly holding back on for fear of spoiling.
Yeah, well, I am literally still reeling from this cinematic feat that I have seen, that I have witnessed. I've never witnessed before in my life. This is new ground. I couldn't sleep last night because, I mean, that sounds extreme, but it's true. But between this and the Matrix Resurrections, it's just all buzzing around my head. And yeah, I just love what they've done. So I'll stop there and we'll talk more in detail later.
Yeah, I have some quibbles, but overall, this is a hell of an accomplishment. It's one of those things where I'm just impressed it's not a huge mess. Like, there's the version of this that is just like throwing everything on screen and it's nonsense. It's like, cool, we like those people, but none of it really plays as a movie. This works. Is it full of fan service? You bet your butt it is. But it very much works. And I saw it at a press screening with not a subdued audience. They were still cheering. But then I saw, Bailey and I and Ryan were all at the first showing at the Chinese theater yesterday. A bunch of us Fandom folks went with an absolutely insane audience. I'm sure we'll talk about more as we continue, who act like they were having like a religious out-of-body experience watching this movie. And definitely, look, for a movie trying to hit home with the audience, it succeeds on that level big time. So yeah, we'll get into the minutia, maybe some issues we had along the way, but I think, yeah, it's definitely a success. Let's first, I think their first big topic just has to be Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, simply because like that's what everyone was hoping for. That's what a bunch of a-holes were trying to spoil with leaked imagery on the internet. It was just the thing that was the most anticipation, that unless you were looking for those spoilers or someone threw them in your face, you weren't 100% sure on, but we're pretty hopeful of. So guys, Andrew and Tobey were back. What did you think of seeing them again and their use in this movie?
I liked Andrew more in this movie than I liked him in his own movies. I thought he was good. I thought he was very likable. He's very charismatic. It was wild seeing Tobey again. When Andrew first showed up, because you can't see who he is, I kind of assumed he was Tobey. I didn't think they were going to get both of them. I was doing a really good job not being spoiled, honestly. I just had my head in the sand. I was like, oh, that's probably Tobey. And he takes his mask off and he's got that giant hair. I'm like, that's not Tobey. Oh, shoot. But I liked it. I liked that both of them got to have like storylines that were resolved sadly in their own universes, got kind of their own sort of like happier or relatively happier resolution in this one. With Tobey, it was like the Doc Ock reunion, and with Andrew, obviously, it was like the making up for letting Gwen Stacy die thing. Like it was like touching. It was nice. It was nice having them. It was nice that they weren't just there for fan service. There was like real narrative reasons, both in this universe and in their own universes, why it was cool they were there.
Yeah, what do you think?
I loved the amount of involvement that they had in the plot, because, you know, there were fears at some point that they'd just be cameos, and they were integral to what went on, and they were both so great. And I agree with you, Bailey, that Andrew Garfield was better and more likable in this movie than in his own movies. I think I might say that about Tobey Maguire as well. He certainly brought a maturity, and not just in his more grizzled look. And I love that you found out, you know, that he'd had a happy relationship over these years with his MJ, and kind of said to Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker, "There's hope for you. You know, you can have this too." Some of the fan service and kind of banter between the Spider-Men was a little bit kind of jarring and didn't always work, and I'd say that about the villains too. But otherwise, yeah, I thought that it was really well executed.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just reiterate that they were in the movie way more than I expected. I thought it would be the final battle, like the glimpses we'd gotten of the Statue of Liberty. I thought they'll come in at the end and it'll be a fun 10 minutes. But they're there for a solid, you know, portion of the movie. And I really love that. And I love that they got scenes that let the movie breathe, and like just the three of them talking, just Andrew and Toby talking, and that they got to have these character moments that I think they could have skimped on, but they didn't. And yeah, the closure, that's like the crazy thing, is like, whoa, this legitimately feels like a sequel to their movies once they come in too. I just rewatched all of them. And so the Andrew Garfield movies, it's like, you know, him and Emma Stone have great chemistry together. I liked him in the movies, even though the second one especially is such a mess. But I was like, oh my God, he's such a good actor. He's making me tear up as he's like talking about letting Gwen die. That's amazing. And so it was like a redemption for him as Spider-Man, because he never got, you know, they never finished that as a trilogy. They never kind of went anywhere with it. So that was really like, I think he kind of comes out of it almost as like an MVP for me, even though I love Toby too. So yeah, that was very, very cool. Any favorite moments for you guys with them? I would say the back cracking is up there for me. But anything stick out for you guys for the Spider-Man interplay?
Oh, that's a good question. I like that back cracking bit. Yeah, although I was a little bit like, oh God, the old jokes. Oh, he's old now. They're both old.
But it's also a callback to the back thing in Spider-Man 2, which was also a callback to his real life back issues. So there's like a
so meta. So meta.
As a person with back issues, I like being represented on screen. What can I say? I thought it was cute. Did I think narratively that was like the best place for that cute little conversation to be happening? You know, grinding the entire action to a halt for 20 minutes right before the final battle. Maybe not my favorite like banter placement, but like isolated from the, you know, the story structure. I thought it was a fun little scene, but also it was like, get to the fight already.
I loved it. I could have had them talking for a half hour.
I think they did actually talk for a half hour, Eric.
Spider chat. Just spider chat. If the deleted scenes, if they want to give us later, that's just.
Oh, they've got so much to discuss. You know, who can blame them?
Before we move on, I'll say the other funny thing I thought with their chat was, again, there was certainly a million meta aspects to it, but also as we talked, you know, sort of the redemption of Andrew Garfield Spider-Man was him feeling like the uncool one of the group. Like, I haven't met an alien. Your villains are cooler than mine, and them extremely meta to tell him he's amazing because his movies are called The Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah, I get it.
But because I loved him so much, I was like, yeah, Andrew Garfield.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the villains though, because obviously that is the way the movie was actually promoted. Was the villains coming in from the other movies. What did you guys think overall of this bevy of villains? We got 5 in total. Not 6. It was still not a Sinister 6. That's something they're still saving one day for a Spider-Man movie. What did you think of them in general, and sort of what stood out to you the most about the use of the 5 returning villains here?
Well, it was very exciting seeing Doc Ock and the Green Goblin again. Obviously, I'll be happy seeing them whenever. But I think again, like the thing that surprised me the most was Jamie Foxx. Like, I mean, they did such a good job, I think, keeping the other villains apart from Doc Ock and Green Goblin under wraps. Like, I did not know any of them were going to show up, and then so many of them showed up. But I think I was very surprised and delighted, much in the way I was with Andrew Garfield, with how Jamie Foxx was in this movie. He was more likable in this movie than in his own movie. He delivered a lot of the funniest lines, I thought. Like, he was great. Every time he was on screen, I'm like, oh, hell yeah, Jamie Foxx is back. Awesome. More from this guy, please. I was rooting for him at the end. I was like, yeah, maybe he should be electrified. I think he's got a point.
Kim?
Jamie Foxx was brilliant, and also one of the worst for me as in this film, because some of his lines just did not land, or they just made me cringe. Some of his lines in the comedy moments, and with the banter between the villains at one point was just like, oh, this is really diminishing their menace. But ultimately, I guess that was deliberate, because they're supposed to be redeemed by the end or cured. So I get that. For me, Willem Dafoe was my favorite. He was just not quite my MVP. I will reveal my MVP later. But aside from that one, he was the MVP for me.
Yeah, same here. I grew up reading Spider-Man comics, and like the Green Goblin, specifically the Norman Osborn version, because there's been a lot of people who have been Green Goblin in the comics, was like his main villain, and we only got that in one movie. And because even in the Andrew Garfield movie, like Chris Cooper shows up then dies, and he was supposed to come back in a sequel we never got. So yeah, to have Dafoe back, and they have two huge fights, and we'll get to him killing a loved one of Peter's, which is a integral part of their history in the comics. Like he was like the real menace here, because yes, the villains were used a lot for comedy, some of which I loved. I mean, I definitely cracked up at the Sandman, Electro, you fell into something, I fell into something too conversation. But I also agree, Kim. I mean, you and I talked about how the first half of this movie felt a little clunky to us, and I think that's because the comedy was like 70% landing, and some of it was like some of it kind of fell a little flat, I thought, for Doctor Strange too. But yeah, as the movie progresses, it's like they redeem Otto, which I think is the right call about halfway through the movie, and then Norman just kind of gets to rise up as like the main villain here. And by the way, I love that he wore a purple sweatsuit over his armor so that it could be torn away and kind of turn him into the comic book costume with the purple. Very convoluted way to do it, but I'll accept it. Let's talk about the ending of the movie, though. Not the credits stuff. That'll be next. But the actual ending of the movie, and how things wrap up for Peter Parker in this movie, which was certainly a big, a huge shift in everything happening here with this sacrifice he makes. What do you think of a very not like the most upbeat ending for Peter, even though Spider-Man is swinging through the city at the end?
I loved it. I actually, anyone who will listen to me talk about Spider-Man, which is becoming a shorter and shorter list these days, know my issues with MCU Spider-Man. I think that Spider-Man's story, it is like crucial for him to be broke as hell, make his own costume, whole thing. I was like complaining about it while in line for snacks before the movie. And then at the end of the movie, I was like, am I a witch? Did I will this into being? Like, I was so amped, because to me, it really kind of takes away from like the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man that I personally love, when he's being bankrolled by a billionaire and he doesn't make his own stuff, and he just like is one like little part of a much bigger, more powered team. Now he just gets to have his own little story that he crafts himself. And like, yes, it's very sad. Obviously, we all want him to go to MIT, but I was amped about it. I loved it. That's my thought. Anyway, sorry, Peter. I want you to be miserable forever. My bad.
Oh, Peter Bailey, you are brutal.
But like in a friendly way. Like,
cool.
Friendly neighborhood, brutal Bailey. There you go.
I loved, so starting with the fight between him and Green Goblin, and you don't for 1 minute think he is going to go and attempt to kill Green Goblin, and then he does. And then he's stopped by Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker in a what if moment, right? Yeah. So, and that shows a darker side of Tom Holland's Peter Parker that we haven't seen before, which could be interesting going forward. And then with the whole the moment when he walks into the bakery or coffee shop, whatever it is, where MJ works, and he's going to give her the note, and she's there, and they have that exchange, and then and Ned's there. He obviously sees that she's happy without him, she's getting on with her life, and if he intervenes at this point, he's going to screw everything up for her. And he does the mature thing. He's finally matured, you know, and he walks away. And you know, I and on top of the fact, you know, it's all kind of returned to scratch for him. It's going to be really interesting in these next 3 films that Amy Pascal has announced as to what direction it goes in. You know, yeah, that's it.
No, I'm glad you mentioned the thing with the Goblin, because it's a very cliche moment we've seen a million times now of the hero being like, I'm not going to stoop to your, like, I almost killing them, but then stopping themselves. I like that he couldn't stop himself, although he kind of did, because another Peter Parker, but it's still like it was like, the fact that he was going to go through with it if Toby hadn't jumped in there, I thought was a nice way to twist a cliche moment. And then I'll mix in some of the AMA as we continue here a little bit. So Karen Stepko says, I kept complaining that the MCU Spider-Man has had it way too easy, all the tech, not enough tragedy. He's definitely been brought to a low point, but I also feel like he'll be okay. Yeah, Karen, I agree. Like, I've loved Tom Holland as Spider-Man, and I've loved his movies, but I also agree, Bailey, it's like an integral element of him was missing because he had so much. And so the fact that this movie, it's like he is just a guy with, as far as we know, almost no money, by himself, sewing his own Spider-Man costume. I love that they made sure to include that. He does not have like super tech armor costume anymore, is great. And also because a weird thing about Spider-Man that makes him such an interesting character is he's like, people love him because he like is like lighthearted and fun, and he's also defined by being like miserable all the time. So yeah, I loved that he like sacrificed everything. Like, he has no one at the end of this movie. It's a little convoluted if he still has friends as Spider-Man. Like if he showed up and said hi to the Avengers, he'd be like, "Hi, Spider-Man. We know you, Spider-Man."
I got the sense that like, because Happy said he knew Aunt
right.
May
That's what I think
Spider-Man.
too.
So like they know who Spider-Man is,
they're
but they don't know who
acquaintances.
he is.
Yeah. But on his personal life, like he has no one as Peter. So great way to get back to that core of the character and making it such an integral like sacrifice on his part. So kudos. I am very, like you said, Kim, I'm very kind of curious what this sort of tees up for the future. Let's talk briefly about the credit scenes, which were a little weird just because we're so used to actual scenes. And one of them was an outright pretty much like sizzle reel trailer, which they did once before. At the end of the first Captain America movie, they did that for the Avengers. It bothered me both times because I like getting an actual scene. But what did you guys think of both these teases? The big one, almost the bigger one, I think, was like showing Tom Hardy has Eddie Brock as Venom. What did you guys think of the credit stuff?
I was just excited Danny Rojas is finally in the MCU where he belongs. But yeah, no, the Tom Hardy scene I thought worked way better for me than I guess you could call it a sizzle reel. You could also call it a badly cut trailer, whatever you want to call the end credit scene when I was just ready to leave. So it was already, to be fair, not in the most charitable headspace, but yeah, not my favorite way for the movie to end. But the mid-credit scene I thought was good. It makes sense for me to not have Tom Hardy and Tom Holland interact, but for there to still be a purpose that he was in the universe, leaving that little bit of Venom behind. It sets up any number of different ways that could go, and all of them are chaotic. So I'm very excited to see like how it pans out.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued as to how come that bit of symbiote was able to remain, because presumably it's Venom that was brought through because he's the one that knows Peter Parker's identity. Because it was established in Let There Be Carnage that he has 80 billion light years of hive knowledge across the universe, universes.
I clocked that too, because it was weird, and we're like, why would Venom even be brought there if it's only people who know Peter Parker is Spider-Man? I'm like, oh, they're saying because other Venoms knew.
That's
Yeah.
the one particle that wasn't paying attention that day.
Yeah,
Right.
maybe that's it. Good explanation, Bailey. Let's go with that. But so it's, you know, we don't know what's going to happen with this bit of symbiote. Are they going to bring a new Venom in? Probably not. Or does this tee up, you know, an evil Spider-Man?
I think it's going to be something like that, because on one hand, it felt a little bit like a weird, like, pullback on a tease, because, you know, Venom Let There Be Carnage's mid-credit scene was like, he's in the MCU and he's something about Spider-Man is making him like angry or drawn to him. And then at this, he gets sent back to his world. But the two things is that piece of symbiote, that'll definitely pick up. I bet we get the MCU version of the black costume, right? And there will be less disco strutting. You know, Tom Holland will get. Sorry, Ryan. I said less. There'll be a little bit.
He said to
pro
us
disco strut.
in our interview that Tom Holland did, that he wanted to explore evil Spider-Man. So
yeah, so I think that he will get a version of the black costume. I do think ultimately, certainly Sony, I'm sure it's more tricky for the MCU side of things. Inevitably they want Tom Hardy and Tom Holland to fight. So there could be a convoluted thing where that piece of symbiote gets to Peter, he gets a costume, but then it's like, I have to get this off me and back to where it came from. And eventually we get the two Tom H's meeting up. But yeah, so I think that it was a fun setup there. Yeah, and then the post-credit, look, I'm psyched from Doctor Strange 2. It looked cool getting these quick flashes of it. I don't like the sizzle reel. Because you almost knew going in that one of the credit scenes had to be a Doctor Strange tease, but I just wanted that cool single scene, you know, the way they do it, you know, show him and Wanda. I'd be happy.
Yeah, if that was just the scene, I would have been like, oh, sick, awesome, it's Wanda again, and then I would have been good and happy and left me like, oh, I'm glad they showed us that. And instead it just kept fading out and like showing other stuff and then fading out again and showing other stuff, and it was like, I have to go, it's 3 a.m.
Let's talk about sort of the mid-movie tragedy here, and obviously a big motivating factor for what follows, which was they killed Aunt May. Aunt May dies. We never had Uncle Ben on screen. He exists, but we never saw him. And Tony Stark was sort of like the parental figure who died for Tom Holland's Spider-Man until now. What did you think of them killing off May just as a story decision, and how they handled it?
I mean, it's her fault. She shouldn't have said the line. If she hadn't said the line, she would have lived. So really, she has only herself to blame.
She killed herself.
I thought it was good. I will say the other thing I complained about in line was that I didn't like that Aunt May was young and hot. I love Marissa Tomei. I just thought it really changed the dynamic. And I really did feel like a witch by the end of the movie. Like I felt guilty for some reason. Like I had caused this. I don't know. But I like it as a story choice. I think it brings a lot of pathos to the Tom Holland Spider-Man that we didn't have before. And it really opens the door for all the metaphorical darkness that he grapples with at the end of the movie, and then presumably the literal darkness he's going to be grappling with when he deals with Venom. So it like narratively really works for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Kim, of Aunt May, R.I.P.?
Yeah, mature superheroes need to have no loved guardians in
like
order
Disney heroes.
Fulfill their destiny. So it had to happen. What I loved about this scene, we talked about this before, but the whole film, the way it balances the humor and the emotional beats, is remarkable, really, because it doesn't lose any of its heart. The power of those emotional bits really hit you. But I wanted to say that both Marissa Tomei and Tom Holland acted that sequence so well, and both, Marissa Tomei is long proven, but Tom Holland showed parts of his reach that I was unaware of in those moments. So I thought they did a great job, and I think the film generally made May a far more interesting and likable character before they ended up killing her off. So.
Yeah, no, I thought it was handled really well, and yeah, like they are such good actors. It's a legitimately like sad scene when she dies. It's one of those funny things. Like, yeah, she gets the, has Bailey's she was doomed by saying, with great power comes great responsibility. But it's one of those things.
She said it, and I was like, oh no, she's like, I knew she was gonna die the second she said it.
But it is funny because it's one of those things fans were like, we haven't gotten that line in these movies, and we got it. So yeah, it was well handled, even though yes, it sort of not expected in specifically, but yes, it's like that. This is the passing, the next step for a hero in his evolution is losing everyone, and while Peter makes some sacrifices of his own by the end, like just losing that parental figure. It was well done sadness, and I feel bad for Happy Hogan, he's had a tough couple of years himself. Yeah. We were theorizing afterwards, after the movie last night. Oh, could something happen between Pepper and Happy? Can they find a surprising love story between them?
Plus, that building he was living in, where he apparently had no neighbors at all, got destroyed. Where are you going to find that in New York?
Like, I mean, I guess
they're
if you're
just
Tony
crashing
Stark
through empty furnished apartment after empty furnished apartment. Like,
that's Stark money, man. That's the Stark corporate building. Corporate
I looked it up after. I was like, is it canonical that Happy just owns this whole building and decorated all of them? Like, it didn't make sense. That kind of distracted me a little bit, not to nitpick, but I was like, okay, seriously, where are the other people in this building?
It's Stark Bucks. I'll get more into the AMA in a moment, but let's talk about just the first big appearance of the movie that so much happens afterwards. That it was funny when the movie ended last night. The second time I saw it, one of my friends had to be reminded, you saw Matt Murdock in this movie a couple of hours ago.
I literally didn't even know who you were about to talk about. I was like, Doc Ock? I was racking my brain. I saw it twice.
But this was another long rumor. This is actually one of the first rumors I remember seeing about this movie, because I think it almost came from fan speculation. It was like, he's in legal trouble, he'll need a lawyer. But what did you think of getting this is where I mentioned we're going to talk about Hawkeye episode 5 a little bit here. Quite a week for actors and characters from the Daredevil TV show to be 100% MCU endorsed. So what did you think of seeing Matt there just for one scene?
It was really fun. It was obvious it was a cameo the moment it happened, but when you just like, what's going to happen? He's going to show some Daredevil abilities, and this brick comes through and he's snatching. How did you do that? Done. Great. Mic drop. It was fun. It obviously means that we'll see more of him in the future, which is great. And with Kingpin coming into Hawkeye, this is quite mouth-watering.
I'll read from the AMA here. Thomas Lang pretty much saying, I love seeing Matt Murdock so much. Surely they got to do something with him again soon. He'll be popping up again. Yes. When you were reminded that you saw him, Bailey, where you had Matt Murdock.
Oh yeah, no, I remember there was that still going around where people were speculating if that one arm was Charlie Cox's arm,
which let him say that's not my arm without.
It turned out to be Stewie from Succession instead. And I was like, oh, wild crossover. Okay. But at that point, I was like, oh, well, that wasn't Charlie Cox. So maybe Charlie Cox just isn't in this movie. And that was just rampant speculation. And then he was. And I was lulled into a false sense of non-Charlie Cox security. And then so I still got to be a little bit surprised, even though I had heard the rumors. It was nice. And I mean, I appreciate that of all the fun surprise, woohoo appearances, it literally was the only cameo, he shows up for one scene, he leaves. But I do think that they are building to something more between Kingpin showing up very briefly in Hawkeye this week, and then at exactly the same time we get a brief glimpse of Daredevil here. It feels like whatever the third thing is going to be really big.
We should mention this is they clearly set the same Christmas as Hawkeye. Rogers the Musical is playing, and this week's Hawkeye made a mention of those changes they're doing to the Statue of Liberty. So Kate and Clint are just running around the corner from MJ's coffee shop. Kate and Clint
could have been helpful here, actually. What were they up to?
They're fighting some tracksuit guys,
Great. Really helpful, Hawkeye. Really great.
Philippe H. He says one criticism was that giving the older characters, I think the Raimi and Mark Webb movie characters, MCU dialogue and humor that they never actually had said just a bit jarring. Did you guys think everyone got an MCU makeover with their appearances here?
I was okay with it. I'm fine with, like, yes, they showed up from other movies, but I don't want to spend an hour with 3 people who are in 3 different movies. Like, that just sounds so tonally jarring to me, when already I feel like the movie did have like some tone issues anyway. Keeping the Spider-Mans all in that same sort of like funny banter vibe, like, lessened the chaos, I feel, to me.
I was okay with, I mean, I see what he or she are saying, as far as like, yeah, everyone, got a little quippier than they might have been in the past. But it's been, look, they when they went through the dimensional portal, you get like a slight like humor influx, and it worked for me.
Ned
Also,
imbued them with humor.
Yeah.
When we're around different people, maybe it brings out different sides of us. Maybe the Tom Holland Peter Parker did that for them.
That's right. They'll all go back a little bit different from it. Stereo Manuk, hope I'm saying your name right, thought the rehab the villains was a bit strange, but an interesting, humane way to try and resolve conflict. This was like a core thing in the movie, of course. It's why Peter disobeys Doctor Strange and doesn't let him send him back. That he's like, what if I can, like, fix these guys both physically and mentally? What do you think of that as a through line, which obviously is a big connection to Aunt May in the movie?
I thought that it was good. I think it made sense for Tom Holland's character. Spider-Man at that point, again, like, hadn't experienced like any real tragedy other than Iron Man dying, which, like, again, was not, like, that doesn't enter into this at all, I think, basically. Where basically he still does kind of have this sunny sort of childlike view of these villains, like, they keep reminding you throughout the movie that he is just a kid. He goes to high school. Strange says he's just a kid. Like, he's a child, and they say, and he has a childlike sense of wonder and like an optimism with the world that the older characters maybe don't have. And so I think those narrative choices really made sense for him, and they really tracked in that. But I do think that the Tom Holland Spider-Man at the end of the movie would not have made the same choices that Tom Holland Spider-Man did at the beginning. I think he would have just hit that button.
Yeah, when they began that sort of subplot, or not, I should say subplot aspect of the movie, this is one of the things I thought sort of started out a bit clunky, with like May, when Norman shows up being like, we have to help these guys. I was like, oh, this feels kind of awkward. But as the movie went on, and of course May's death being like this huge moment, then I started to kind of get more into it. And it was a nice sort of thing about that, like, when MJ is like, oh, it's because he's a good guy. When Otto's like, why didn't you send us back? And it's like, because that's not who he is. So I liked it, that it was like this thing. I mean, we don't really know what happens when they go back. He does say it gives them a chance, because what if they just go back and they still just like die right away the same way they were going to die? But I guess it's still like, hey, maybe they can come back and say, Spider-Man, stop fighting. I'm good now. What do you think, Kim, of the redeem them all?
Yeah, part? I mean, on paper it sounds very silly, but with these characters, these characters in particular, they all had issues, psychological issues, and were involved in lab accidents, whatever. And so it did make sense that you could, or Peter, the genius that he is, science and maths genius that he is, could create some kind of serum, whatever, to cure them. I like the possibilities or the implications of that. What happens now. I like to think about what's going on in their universe, as you just mentioned, Eric, and what it means for the future for those characters should they return at some point.
Yeah, it was cool because he first got to work with Norman and Otto, and then it was just 3 Peters who were all scientific geniuses working together. I will say one gripe here, and when I've rewatched the movie, I've thought about this, is like they couldn't quite figure out Sandman's deal, because he's not a bad guy like the other guys. So he just wants to get home to his daughter. But in that final fight, I'm like, what are you doing, dude? Because Elektra's like, I want to destroy the box. And basically Sandman's like, well, I want the box to go home. I'm like, are you this impatient? Like, what are you doing jumping alongside Lizard and Electro? I think it was a little murky. It seemed like Sandman should just be like, oh, you're curing them all right now. Oh, I can wait 20 minutes. It's like, Sandman, calm down, man. But it is, again, there's a lot of characters, and the much messier version of this movie probably would have stopped and tried to give like huge deals for all of them. So I understood, but also it's okay. Let's see. Who thought the landlord? This is Sean Hunter asks, who thought the landlord from Spidey 2 was going to show up at the end when Tom got that apartment? That's Mr. Ditkovich. And if Ursula, I keep joking, but not the kind-hearted Ursula, the neighbor from the Sam Raimi movies, showed up, that would have been the greatest moment of everything. So I'd like to believe there is an Ursula down the hall now from Tom Holland. Guys, do you believe the Ditkoviches live in his building now?
Yes, I'm going to say yes.
I think every universe has a Ditkovich.
That's right.
We've now been introduced to ours.
And Bruce Campbell. Where was Bruce Campbell?
I know, right? And we know he's going to be in the Doctor Strange movie. So
Yeah.
You know? Let's see. I think we're mostly winding down here. We say the Peter said Langley M. Neely says the Peter MCU stuff, and this was a 10 for me. The nostalgia villain stuff, which wasn't my favorite idea, was a 7 for me. It was done well, but I didn't need any of it. I liked the mixture. I think we kind of all agree, though. It's like, yeah, the villains were fun. Maybe sometimes it got a little too wacky, but you know.
I thought like the wackiness, like just the insistence on constant wackiness, like was fine for me in the first half. But I think at the point when May dies, like there were a lot of tonal shifts in the movie that didn't work for me. Like, again, overall really liked it, but I do think like joking, and then something very tragic happens. You don't then go right back to joking, like, but they did in this movie. It made me think sort of like in Mulan, and the animated Mulan that came out in, I think, 1998. You know, they're doing the A Girl Worth Fighting For song, the silliest song in the movie, and then they come upon the village that was destroyed by the Huns, and then after that it's serious business because the tone has shifted. And I thought that this was going to be the Huns have destroyed the village moment, but instead it just went right back to just a different scene, girl worth fighting for, and it just felt very like whiplashy to me.
I think they mostly made that work, but I also see what you're saying, that sometimes it was a little
there was no chance to really like dwell in the like the pathos of it, because you just go right back to another silly scene after watching Tom Holland cradle his dying aunt in his arms, and then it's just Zendaya and Ned are joking. I recognize that some of them are actors and some of them are character names. You just have to go with it with me. I'm sorry.
It happened. I do the same.
I have a question, Eric.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel? I mean, we're talking about this in the chat too, but how do we feel about the John Watts of it all? I thought this was the best shot of the 3 movies, especially the first half. I just like, not shot extravagantly, but just like shot well to kind of set up all the problems Peter was facing, a lot of closed in shots because his world was closing in and blah, blah, blah. But I feel better about Watts for Fantastic Four. I wonder how you guys, chat's pretty mixed on it. They still, there's a lot of Watts, maybe skeptics in the chat.
He's not the most visually dynamic director. His strength with these movies has been that he's really good with character, and the first 2 being much more like about high school, or the second one a trip with the high school class that played to his strengths, but yeah, this like I thought when they did the Doctor Strange visual stuff here was cool, not as cool as it looked in Doctor Strange's movie, but still cool. I wish he was a little more of a visual stylist, but I thought it mostly worked. Kim, you and I talked about how again, I not to say that this movie it would have been just too overstepped anyway, but has a trilogy. It's a little weird that like all of Peter's other high school classmates and his teachers are like tiny cameos in this movie when they were such a big part of the first 2 movies. As a trilogy, then it's kind of strange, the third one. But I still thought Watts did a good job here juggling so much. I do wish, he had a little more visual flair. What do you guys think?
I mean, that's just what senior year is like, Eric.
You're looking towards the future, and
by the time I graduated high school, everyone I knew was basically a cameo in my life too.
Ooh, I like this.
Yeah, there you go. But yeah, no,
Wow.
I don't think he's making a lot of like bold choices, like the directing in most MCU movies, and this one included, never really like takes risks, I've noticed. So I think that kind of continues the trend. It was fine.
Yeah, I mean, what I want to point out is that the final battle was visible.
Yeah.
And I knew what was going on, and so kudos for that, because that's not the case, and not all the final battles of all the MCU movies are particularly engaging, and this was. And the one-on-one fight between Norman and Peter was brutal, and I enjoyed that.
Yeah, same here. So yeah, I think he'll do really good with Fantastic Four on the character level. And hopefully they give some cool special effects around it. They will. So, Trevor Reese says it was so great that Garfield / Spidey 3 was the one who saves MJ falling tease in the trailer. 100% agree. I did think, man, I wish they didn't tease that in the trailer, because a lot of us thought, ooh, I bet Andrew Garfield is going to be the one to save her. But putting that aside, because that's a marketing decision, it's a great moment. It's again, the fact that this movie legitimately can feel like a sequel to the Raimi and Mark Webb movies is crazy, and that he has that emotional moment holding MJ. That was great. I think we're all on the same page on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Finally got to emotionally resolve that. It was nice.
That's
I
right.
was really happy for him.
I mentioned I actually never really did go back to the fact how insane the audience was last night, and the fact that it's like one of the things that was drowned out was like because people were cheering so much was like her saying to him like, "Are you okay?" Which is a great moment. I just think yes. By the way, Kim, when Tobey Maguire made his appearance, it was one of the longest sustained cheers I'd ever heard in a movie. It was like 90 seconds, would you say, guys? Like
it was long. It was a lot of, I didn't think people would have that much energy for cheering at that point in the movie, but they sure did. They did.
Like it was great, but it was also insane, and you could not hear any of the initial dialogue because it was just
the energy was wild. I am very glad I saw it a second time, because like it was so cool, like having all that audience energy around everyone being so excited. And yet frankly, there are a lot of fan service, like blatantly fan service moments in this movie, and everyone was cheering for every single one of them, to the degree that I was missing a lot of the dialogue. So seeing it again was good, because then I only had to miss like a little bit of the dialogue.
So let's bring this home. Any final thoughts? Any final gripes? I'll throw out one last gripe. It's a fanboy complaint, but it's not, because there's a weird continuity issue here, which is because it's so prevalent, which is, how does Otto know that Norman was the Green Goblin? Don't tell Harry. That's like a huge deal. No one knew Norman was the Green Goblin. So it's really strange that he like knows he got killed by his glider. He knows like all this stuff. It's a weird continuity issue that shouldn't be there.
What I'm gonna just speculate is that when he died, they took his mask off of him, and then everyone was like, "Oh, dang! This totally wealthy guy that we all know was the guy who was zipping around on the glider the whole time. That's wild, man." And they went about their day.
But Peter put his body in his house without the costume for Harry to find.
Good point. Yeah. Sorry, it's been a really long time since you watched the movies more recently than me. I was like, I don't know. They probably took his mask off. Eric, what do you mean?
It's just, it's someone will come up with a convoluted thing about Otto. Otto had inside intel, apparently.
Man, he's so smart. So he just maybe figured it out.
Villains know villains.
They do.
That's right.
You recognize that handiwork anywhere.
If you're a scientist and you work at Oscorp, you just and you're an evil villain, you have a connection. Oh, by the way, I did think Harry promising never to turn into a villain who will try to kill
Ned. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ned.
Yes.
Now I'm screwing up my universe.
Ned was so, in the final sequence that he was in, so together, seemed such a different person. I'm like, you are going to turn into this villain. That is coming.
Well, I think he's definitely going to turn into a magical apprentice who will be popping up in a Disney Plus Wong series that I keep saying they're eventually going to do. That is my prediction.
Yeah.
I'm excited for him to have magic. I hope he gets like a magical boy like transformation sequence, Sailor Moon style. I think that's what Ned deserves, and I want to see it. A lot of like portals and like, spinning around and stuff. The usual thing. It'll be great.
I'm down for it.
You asked about gripes, and before we wrap up, I want to get my 2 gripes in. And one of them is that why did we only get these 2 Peters come through? Why was it these 2 and not others?
Why did they know to stop there?
Pardon?
Yeah, why did they know to stop there? They were like, we just got to keep going until we find the right one. And then instead they stopped at the 2.
Yeah. I mean, I would have liked to have seen Nicholas Hammond from the 70s, or maybe Nick Cage's Spider-Man Noir.
We should mention that they do the little reference to Miles Morales with "There's a Black Spider-Man out there" with Jenny Fox.
Yes, And the other thing was I wanted more of Ned's mum because she was my MVP.
That's right. You had to give us her review. She was pretty good. She definitely got some use out of the Spider-Man in her house. We only got those. We got Venom was the other. So he was from another universe. So maybe there was a few out there like Venom just having drinks. They weren't breaking stuff. They're just Nicholas Hammond was just like, hey, I'm just gonna chill out. I'm in Los Angeles.
Yeah, maybe.
The last question I'll just ask for you guys is this was such a huge scale movie. Should they even try to top it with a Spider-Man movie? The MCU will try to top it. But on a Spider-Man scale, live action, forget the Into the Spider-Verse animated stuff. Do you think that they should maybe try to think smaller going forward? Because, this was a success. But what do you want to see next for this character?
I feel like they've set up a really good, premise for a limited Disney Plus series for him. I don't think it needs to be big. I think maybe he has a 6-episode exploration of his dark, isolated self, where at the end there's some light at the end of the tunnel, and we get that nice subtle TV character arc, as opposed to big 3-hour movie where I'm not allowed to go to the bathroom.
This is almost what Tom Holland pitched to Kim about wanting to see a indie movie version of Peter Parker.
Oh my God, Tom Holland and I are so in sync. I should talk to him.
And then maybe, we can see Miles Morales come in and he becomes his mentor, and then Tom Holland leaves and Miles Morales Spider-Man is now Spider-Man in the MCU.
Right. I mean, I think that will probably eventually.
So good.
I hope the next movie they'll build back towards big things, and who even knows? Have we seen the last Toby and Andrew? I wouldn't count anything out. But I hope the next movie is a smaller one. Let's see this down on his luck Spider-Man at least for a full movie. Just doing his thing and fighting a villain or two. So we'll see. Guys, thanks for watching our Spider-Man No Way Home spoiler chat. Hope you enjoyed the movie. I think we've already mentioned that next week we begin pre-tapes. Monday SGU will be pre-tape, but Kim and I will still be back to talk about the Hawkeye finale live on Wednesday and the Boba Fett premiere the week after that. So look for all that and plenty more here at Fandom. But I'll still say happy holidays just to make sure I did it. Thanks, guys. Bye.